Welcome back, everybody. It's the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Fantasy Football Podcast brought to you by Reality Sports Online. I'm your host, Scott Bogman. And today we're going to be talking about players that we want no part of. And to do that, of course, we have Pat Fitzmaurice at Fitz_FF on the Twitter machine. And a guest we are bringing in from Dynasty Trade Calculator. It is Izzy E at DTC_Izzy, IZZYE. And look, he's the Pharaoh of Fantasy. So we're going to get to hear who he is casting aside and not want on his teams at all this year, at least in startups. But I got to tell you guys about some stuff that we have happening over here at Fantasy Pros right now. We have a giveaway for a Cam Akers autographs helmet we're doing right now. All you need to do is subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/fantasypros. Take a screenshot, submit it to fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. That's fantasypros.com/dynasty contest. And you are entered in to win. Do it as soon as possible because this ends at the end of the month. So get in to get that Cam Akers autograph helmet as soon as you can. Our Discord is free to enter, but premium Fantasy Pro subscribers get a whole bunch of other perks like dozens of extra channels, regularly scheduled AMAs, and interactive voice chats with our analysts. Want to talk fantasy whenever you want or chat with Fantasy Pros analysts? Just check out our Discord at fantasypros.com/chat. Again, that's fantasypros.com/chat. I do them every single Monday. I have a stages that I do where I answer questions from everyone in the fantasy football community. It's a lot of fun. I do that at 8 p.m. Eastern. Come check it out. I know Pat, you do AMAs as well. It is a lot of fun over there at Discord. So, Izzy, so happy to have you here. The Pharaoh of Fantasy. Are you ready to talk about some players you want no part of?
Yeah, I'm always ready for that.
It's going to be, not a hateful episode, but there are guys. We're going to have opinions on guys that we just kind of don't want to be drafting, at least at their price. And I think, Pat, there is really no take this guy off of my list completely. I mean, I'm sure some people have that, but I'm never let's take this guy out. Let's take this guy out at where he's going. And that is what we're talking about, are players that are being overvalued right now in Dynasty, correct?
Yeah. We don't hate players. We hate prices. And, sometimes you might be stuck with the guy you feel like you can't sell at the right price, and you just have to ride him into the sunset. Ideally, you don't wind up with that. You can always sell guys at a deep discount. But I know these are guys we're not looking to buy, and maybe guys we're looking to move if we can at some sort of reasonable price.
Izzy, what do you think gets more overvalued? Do you think a player himself gets more overvalued, or is it more of a situation that gets overvalued?
Ooh, I'd probably say it's a good question. I think it depends on how you want to look at it. I think a situation gets more overvalued when it comes to the fact that usually it's just not justified, right? The situation,
right.
Overvaluing a player, or kind of looking at a player's perspective, it's usually justified. A situation typically isn't. We create a lot of false narratives with situations, so I'd say that.
Yeah, and it's Chris Harris, who's famously been around in the fantasy football community forever, says it's a crutch argument. Well, someone has to catch passes, someone has to run the ball, someone has to throw passes. These are crutch arguments. So I see that a lot, but I also see players, and I think the thing that overrates players the most, and you guys can let me know if you agree, is past success. Well, this guy had success with this team, in this situation, with this coach, whatever. I mean, look, it's a nice marker to have. I don't want to discount anyone for playing well previously, but I think a lot of the times you extrapolate or you buy situations that were already perfect, thinking, well, it can be perfect again, and it's not. Pat, is that something that you would agree with, or are you more, it's the players, it's the situation?
No, past success is big because people always think that player can return to the past success. And there are managers in your league who enjoyed that past success. So those players conjure up good feelings for those managers. And they're always usually the ones most willing to grant that player another chance, even if it's unwarranted sometimes.
Izzy, have you ever had that player that you just couldn't give up on? You rode them into the ground. They never did it, but you just kept backing them and saying, man, as soon as this guy gets the scenario, I know he's going to break out, because I feel like that's been 50% of my takes.
No, I would say the guy that kind of has always been, linked to me is probably Josh Gordon.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily his talent was the issue, is the fact that every time he'd come back, he'd just get busted. Right. Yeah. So that would be probably the guy that I just continued to kind of hang on to and hope that he'd return. And now he's 31 years old. So now it's just kind of weird. Now he's like the old guy.
Yeah.
Izzy is not alone in the, the Josh Gordon hope. It would be like, even just a couple of years ago, and you'd kind of be like looking at your watch, like, dude, that season was 2013. It's 2020 now. Come on, man. Give up the ghost.
I mean, I've kept saying to the Welsh on the ITL Fantasy Football Show, like, are we going to do it again with Josh Gordon? And I think it was 3 years ago. He was finally like, I can't do it anymore. Sometimes, because I like a current guy for me is Adam Troutman. I just want Troutman to be successful. I think the guy can catch the ball. But if he doesn't do it this year, I got to be done with him. Right. I mean, it's like, what's that quote? It's like Fetch. We got to quit making it happen. Right. So I don't know. That's just, I know I get stuck on some players. So we'll see if we mention any of the players that anyone out there is getting stuck on. So let's start at quarterback. Guest Izzy, you're going to go first. Lead us off here. Who is a quarterback that in Dynasty, their value is too high right now and you would want no part of?
Yeah, this one's actually really tough, because I wanted to pick one guy, and unfortunately, it's probably a few guys that I'd probably stay away. And I tried to stay away from the guys that you mentioned on your list, because one of them is definitely number one on my list. But I will save that one. I would probably lean either Jalen Hurts or Trey Lance, and honestly, it's just purely based on their value right now. Their values have both skyrocketed. I would say I'm more concerned with Trey Lance, because at least with Jalen Hurts, we've seen the floor. And the floor is good enough, I think, to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. But with Trey Lance, kind of reading through the tea leaves and all the things that have been said in the offseason, and the fact that Jimmy G is still in tow, it does worry me a little bit about his value. The thing that kind of keeps me from going all in and saying, hey, this is a guy I definitely do not want to touch, is when he's actually played. He hasn't been great as a passer, but his floor has been like 18 or 19 fantasy points a game.
Yeah.
And it's only been a couple games. But at the end of the day, when we're paying top 2-round startup prices for Superflex leagues, when you have Jalen Hurts and Trey Lance in the top 2 rounds, you start to really get concerned with the fact that you're hanging on by a thread that they eventually put together their game as passers. And I don't know if either one of them actually do. And if they don't, you're sitting there holding the bag, top 2-round equity. So those would probably be the two guys that they'd be second and third on my list, behind one of the guys that you guys are going to be mentioning. So I won't spoil that.
So if right now I had to ask you, you get to choose one, and it's either one of those guys. Who are you taking? Is it Lance or is it Hurts?
Shoot. I choose one. This is probably the wrong answer, but I would take Trey Lance only because, well, a couple things: draft capital and Shanahan. So I think the way that Shanahan designs his offense, he manufactures positive touches for players. So look at a guy like Jimmy G. He's a one-read quarterback. He's made Jimmy G relatively successful. He's hit a lot of the deficiencies that Jimmy G has in his offense. And I think with Trey Lance, he can definitely do that. And then Trey Lance offers such high rushing upside that he can get away with a lot in that offense. So I'd probably say I'd take Trey Lance over Jalen Hurts. But I wouldn't take it to the bank.
Between those two, I would take Jalen Hurts we've already seen what he can do, which is kind of goes back to that past success thing that I just talked about, but I'm also very excited to see what AJ Brown brings to this offense. So that is why I would pick Jalen Hurts, but I agree. I feel like they're both being overrated right now, because what Jalen Hurts has shown us, really what the Eagles have shown us, is they don't really like Jalen Hurts that much. And they are starting him because he has had success, not because they love him, which is a guy that I'm going to talk about in a second, I feel like, as well. But Pat, do you agree on those takes? And also we need your quarterback as well.
Yeah, so I mostly agree with those. I'd be more likely to slam the door on Hurts because I think there's no chance he's ever like even an average passer, and the price is still pretty high. I was hoping there would be maybe a little bit of a discount on Lance this offseason. I was kind of looking to actually scoop up a share of Lance or two. Not so much the discount I was looking for. I thought people might be freaked out that Jimmy G hadn't been moved yet. But at least like there's hope. I think you can tell a story that maybe Lance is going to be at least a league average passer. And
in FantasyPros ECR, just to clarify here, it's 10 for Lance. So a guy that we haven't seen start even half a season yet is a QB1, and Hurts is 12. So both going as QB1. So I'm with you. Who's your QB, Fitz?
So it's Russell Wilson, which hurts me, man. I'm a Wisconsin guy. And I'm not that freaked out about Russ not really looking like himself down the stretch last year, because he had that gnarly finger injury. I mean, it looked like he had been in an industrial accident or something, So I'm not surprised that he was, airmailing his receivers on some of those throws and just missing guys. And like the chemistry with DK Metcalf just completely evaporated. What worries me a little more is that like part of what made Russ such a special player was his evasiveness. He just had that great move. And I think Seahawks fans are going to know exactly what I'm talking about, because they've seen it hundreds of times, where an edge rusher was bearing down on him and Russ would just have this like real tight little spin that he would use to like kind of peel around that edge rusher and basically run into the space the edge rusher just vacated. And now he's on the move, has bought himself some time. His receivers have time to like shake their defenders and get open. Russ can run it. He can find one of those open guys. A lot of big plays have come that way. And last year, I did not see that from Russ at all. Like, I did not see him evade pass rushers like he used to.
And he said he's tired of getting hit, right? I mean, he's said that.
Yeah, he always had to, because Seattle never believes in investing in their offensive line, and he's been running for his life. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, they finally draft take a top offensive lineman. Go figure. So anyway, like, I worry that non-evasive Russ is not going to be as valuable, and I think a lot of people are, attracted to him now that he's in Denver. Like, it's the way to get in on that passing game without having to choose between Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton. But I mean, last year, so before the finger injury, 9.6 yards per attempt. I think that was through 5 weeks. After the finger injury, 7.0 yards per attempt.
There's no way he gave himself enough time. He was all about not missing any time, and he came back too fast, I feel.
I mean, he only threw for more than 250 yards once in his final 9 games after that finger injury. So lowest QBR of his career. Yeah, man, I'm a little worried. And like on the FantasyPros Dynasty trade value chart, says that in Superflex, he's roughly equivalent to Jalen Hurts. I'd rather have Hurts. Austin Ekeler, Stefon Diggs, Jalen Waddle. I think I'd rather have all those guys, even in Superflex. And I know that Izzy, preaches the economy of Superflex and the importance of the quarterbacks. But I think in this case, I would rather have some of those position guys.
Izzy, what do you think of Russ? Are you out on Russ too, or is this a bad take from Fitz? I love arguments.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I would have said I've kind of always been out on Russ up until this point. I'm kind of his prices come down enough to where it's worth it. Seattle was league low in pass attempts last season. Denver, even with their Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock poo-poo platter, they passed the ball, I think, 32 times a game. So I think Denver has a more likelihood that just even 4 or 5 pass attempts additional for Russ is going to equate to another 3 or 4 potential opportunities for a run after the yards after the catch. That should be, yards per attempt perspective. That should be an extra, 25 yards a game just going to Denver. So I've never been a big Russ fan. I felt like it was a limited ceiling in Seattle, just the way that their offense is run. And I think Denver is bringing him in, and I believe they've always wanted to open things up, and this gives them the opportunity to do so. And you're getting Russ at kind of like a discount because now he's kind of starting to age out of high value, and he's still being drafted as a QB1. But, if you think about Russ 3, 4, 5 years ago, he was being drafted as a mid to high QB1. So he was a top 5 quarterback a handful of years ago. And I think that he's probably going to have his best seasons over the next couple of seasons in Denver. So I'm more likely to try to acquire him now than I have ever tried to acquire him. But like Pat was saying, if all of the concerns Pat mentioning are true, then what's going to end up happening is his dynasty value is going to, it's going to crash.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is some risk there, but I think the potential reward there is enough to justify being on the other side of that.
The guy that I'm going to pick here is Tua, and I do like Tua a lot. And they're doing everything they possibly can in Miami to put tools around him. Obviously, they traded for Tyreek Hill. They brought in some running backs as well. Mike Gesicki is staying. Like, they are doing everything they can to make him great. But I think it's a new coaching staff that didn't draft him. It seemed like last year that all these Deshaun Watson rumors seemed like they did want to replace him. I know that was a little, coach versus GM, and GM wins out in that. So Tua is still their guy. But I think we're just going to get a 1-year look at Tua. And if, they don't like him, he is going to be gone. And it's the arm strength. And I think also when you see all of these tools, you're going to say, we got to get somebody else in here. We got to get someone with an arm that can throw downhill to Waddle, that can throw downhill to Tyreek, that can throw Gesicki open. And this is going to be a run-first offense. So, right now, Tua is going off at QB 18 in ECR. They're just guys below him that I would rather have. Carr, Wilson, I would still take. Mac, Cousins, and Pickett. Mac Wilson, that is, by the way. But I would take those guys over Tua. I just don't know that he fits, and this is going to be run first. Is this the guy that you were talking about, Izzy, that is number 1 on your list?
Yeah, with a bullet. Now, listen, the risk really comes down to the fact that if Mike McDaniels is legitimate and they've surrounded him with all of the right pieces, that if he fails here, he's just not good. But I've always been an anti-Tua guy coming into the league, so I feel justified in my take because what's transpired. I mean, Miami I think was 8th in pass attempts last season, and Tua was like bottom of the league in just about every passing category. So like, he's just not good. Well, he hasn't been good. Now, if he's surrounded by the right pieces, maybe. But like you said, they're gonna run more. So if his pass attempts are going to come down from 8th in the league to probably somewhere in the middle half, I mean, San Francisco last year was 30th in the league. So if that's the coaching tree that Mike is coming from, and he's going to take Miami from 8th to 30th, he's going to have some serious efficiency increases for him to have a good ROI based on where he's being taken right now. So I agree with you. I'm not a Tua guy. I do think that if anything, what's going to end up happening is going to turn into like Jimmy G 2.0, where he's going to get the ball into space to these playmakers, and they're just going to do all of the work. But that still doesn't make Tua a great fantasy quarterback either. There's going to be a huge volume increase from what San Francisco did to what Miami's going to do for him to actually be a QB1 with Mike Daniels there.
Yeah, when your quarterback is not making throws to take the ball out of your hands, they give it to running backs, and they brought in every running back here. Pat, where are you at on Tua? Do you think 18 is fair? Is it a little too high? Is it way too high? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to be with you guys. I mean, I've got him in a super flex league where he and Kyler are my top 2 quarterbacks, and I'm obviously delighted at what they did. Not only the pass catchers, Tyreek Hill, Chase Edmonds, he's still got Jalen, Waddle, and Gesicki. Teron Armstead to protect, the left side, which is key. So yeah, they are giving him no excuses, whatsoever. And if he fails, he's likely doomed to a career as a backup. Like, this is his time. And I worry, like you guys, that he's just more of a game manager than a playmaker. And like the game manager thing, it's going to be glaring if you can't fully utilize Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and the kind of speed that he's going to have. Those guys can take the top off a defense. Can Tua take advantage of that? And with his arm strength, there's reason to think maybe he can't.
He did it at Alabama. So I don't want to completely wreck Tua. He did it at Alabama. He's moving further away from this hip surgery, which has got to be just better for him. So there are avenues to him succeeding, but the arm strength and the whole, if it's your third year, if you don't do it this year with all these weapons, you're out. And the QB class next year is looking pretty good. I don't have a ton of confidence long term into it. We're going to move to running backs. Before we do, I got to just tell you guys, by now, most of you have probably heard Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like any general NFL manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract salary cap functionality, and much, much more. I can't even keep my breath going through all that stuff. Think it sounds complicated? It is not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test your general manager skills for free FREE in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use a promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. Izzy, we're on running backs now. Who are, you can give us a couple, you can give us one, however many you want. Who are the running backs that you are out on in Dynasty value right now?
Yeah, so that's a big thing is value. So I'm trying to think of what are the higher end guys that I'm not too excited about. And I'm an ageist when it comes to Dynasty. I used to not be. So I used to, be all about these older players. But what's happened is there's been a shift in the economy in Dynasty. And I'm a big proponent of flexible assets. The more flexible assets you have on your roster, the easier it is to pivot and the easier it is for you to acquire the players that you're looking to acquire. If you have these older players that there's no market for them, there's no economy for them in your leagues, then they're fixed assets. So that you're stuck having them on your roster and you got to die with them essentially. Like if you had Julio Jones over the last few years, you're stuck. Like nobody's taking them off your hands. So the best bet is to get rid of them at a certain age. And that age for running backs happens to be 26 years old. So that's when you want to get out from your running back. So once they hit 27, their value starts to, it peaks. And then from there, any and all turbulence will, continue to spiral out of control for dynasty value. So the big two for me, one is Austin Ekeler. Now he's everybody's favorite. I think from a fantasy perspective, great. From a dynasty perspective, I don't love it for a couple reasons. One, he's never been outside of last year. He's never been a big, touchdown guy. He went from one touchdown, let's say 3 touchdowns in 2019 because he actually played 16 games. I know Melvin Gordon was there, but he went to 12. But now they brought in Isaiah Spiller. So how does that impact inside the 20? So his weight and gold is more on the receiving side. So that's where all of his value is predicated, is on the receiving side. And his receptions, 70 receptions for 647 and 8 is fantastic. However, he just turned 27 today. So his value next year, no matter what he does, will be lower than it is today. And that's assuming that he plays a full slate of scheduling, assuming that Isaiah Spiller does not even touch the field this year. He gets redshirted. Ekeler is still going to struggle to maintain value. So, he's had, a couple injuries in the past. Obviously in 2020 he had an injury. In 2018 he got injured. So I look at Austin Ekeler and he's kind of sitting there with you're left with a low ceiling because we saw what his ceiling was last year. We got his full 16 game slate. He got a full 20 touchdown. Essential. He had 206 carries and 70 receptions, and he managed 20 touchdowns. That's a massive touchdown rate relative to the touches that he got. So I look at it, his yards per touch were pretty low relative to where it's been in the past. So he's being utilized more as a runner, obviously. But 200 carries, I think that comes down with Isaiah Spiller in tow. And then you got the 70 receptions, I think kind of stays pat, might go up a little bit, but not enough to keep his value afloat going into next year. So he'd be an easy sell for me.
Yeah, he's going off right now, RB6 he's ranked in Dynasty ECR. And you trade a guy like this who is, valued at 6 right now, he's going to net you back a lot. So, this is a prime time to trade a guy like that. What do you think, Pat? Are you at number 6? Are you in or out on Ekeler?
Oh, Izzy totally nailed this one. I mean, it was a heroic 2021 season for Austin Ekeler, no question about it, but it filled the Austin Ekeler bubble with helium, and that bubble does look ready to burst. I mean, they've been saying, the Chargers have been telling us they don't want Austin Ekeler to have the sort of workload that he handled last year. They drafted Josh Kelly 2 years ago. He stunk. They drafted Larry Roundtree last year. Couldn't get on the field. He obviously stunk. They drafted Isaiah Spiller this year. So one of these years, they're going to get it right with this complimentary back. And, maybe they did with Spiller, who, was pretty much early in the pre-draft process before he tested poorly at the combine, like the consensus 2 or 3 running back. Yeah. And so good reason to believe he's the guy who's finally going to take that significant chunk of early down carries and, sort of sap the value away from Ekeler. And, Izzy mentioned the age thing too. Yeah. We know the age apex for running backs is I think 24.7 is what Player Profiler found in a study. So yeah, he's on the wrong side of that.
And honestly, I look at Austin Ekeler and Aaron Jones, both 27-year-old running backs. Let me trade Austin Ekeler and receive Aaron Jones plus. I mean, if you're expecting, you're going to expect similar sort of production out of both of them this year. And who knows what's going to happen, next year with both players, going into 2023. But I'm going to get literally Aaron Jones at whatever RB, he's in the RB 17, depending on where you look. He's in between RB 17 and 22 in Dynasty. And I would argue that Aaron Jones is going to have a better season than Austin Ekeler.
Yeah. And, touchdown regression is coming. You're not going to get 20 back-to-back years. I'm not saying it's out of the realm of possibility. We see what Ekeler did. If he repeats what he did last year, then, yeah, he can do it. But no one should expect that. So going off at 6 is very, very high. Pat, who do you have as a player you don't want because of their value right now in Dynasty?
So the bubble on this guy is not quite as inflated as it is with Ekeler, but it's Ezekiel Elliott, and he's another one of those guys who is aged out of his most productive years. He's going to be into his age 27 season. I mean, 1,990 career carries in 6 years if we include the playoffs. 396 career catches, at least 268 touches every year in his 6-year career. I mean, this guy's got a lot of mileage on the odometer. So it's not only 27, but kind of an old 27. And yes, he played with a partially torn PCL last year, but really wasn't all that effective and hasn't been for the last 2 years. Over his first 4 seasons, 4.6 yards per carry. The last 2 years, 4.1 yards per carry. And I know it's kind of a trash stat, and people are probably, laughing at me for bringing it up. But I mean, also yards per catch have completely capsized for him. His first 4 seasons, 11.3, 10.3, 7.4, and 7.8 yards per catch. The last 2 years, 6.5 and 6.1. So he's definitely becoming less efficient and less explosive. And Tony Pollard is good. I mean, he's not going anywhere. And we saw with the end of the Mike McCarthy era in Green Bay, when we had the free Aaron Jones movement, McCarthy likes to use more than one back. So Zeke is not going back to that, crazy usage we saw under Jason Garrett in Dallas. He's not getting that. And I don't think he's really up for it anyway. So, price is kind of falling. Our Dynasty trade value chart says Davis Mills in Superflex, Gabriel Davis, Mike Williams, Dallas Goedert are like comparable values. And I think I'd rather have some of those guys, quite honestly, even though Zeke's still got that superstar cred. But, find the manager in your league who enjoyed some of the salad days with Ezekiel Elliott and see if they're still interested.
I think I might be that guy in a couple of those leagues. Because, look, I know you can't say that he's going to go up to 1,500 yards and 15 touchdowns. It's just not going to happen again, right? I don't see it happening for Zeke. But I do like the fact that right now he's a low-end RB2. He's RB22 for PPR in Dynasty as it stands right now. And I still think there's touchdown upside because the offense is good in Dallas, but he is definitely perceived as more valuable than he actually is right now. So, Izzy, what do you think of Zeke? Do you think 22 is appropriate? Do you think that's still too high because he's about to fall off the ledge here?
Yeah, it's funny. He was like my number one sell last season. Kind of, I anti Zeke. So even at this value,
the price has fallen so far that you
now it's
right.
But that's what it makes you do. It's like, it's going to get a little further than this, but is it going to get further than this in the next 2-3 years of low end RB2? It could this year. Pollard could pass him up.
I mean, here's the thing. Pollard's been more efficient than him in the last 2 seasons. Like both seasons across the board efficiency, Tony Pollard. Now you can make the argument that their touches are different. And that's
right.
totally
That's
fine.
true.
You can make that argument. But if you look at just the receiving game, Tony Pollard is significantly better than Zeke in the receiving department. So you can venture to, like, Tony Pollard just has more juice. It's evident. You can you don't even have to look at the advanced analytics on it. You can watch the games. Watching the games, Zeke looks toast. And the reason why I had done the whole sell on Zeke is he was the type of guy, and I said, he's the type of guy that once he gets his big contract, I don't think that he's going to grind. I think he's going to mail it in. And that's what it looks like is happening with Zeke. And even at RB, we have him at RB20. I think you said you had an RB22, that Fantasy Pros?
Yeah, ECR. Yep.
Yeah, and I mean, he's like right neck and neck with RB20, 21, 22. They're all in that same pocket. And honestly, like, God, it's so hard to say that a guy that was 3 years ago was like borderline RB1 is now RB20 and he's been healthy. It's just wild to me.
Yeah, he's not even the most dramatic because guys like Gurley just completely fall off the map.
But his at least was attributed to an injury. Like Zeke he's played and he's completely lost all of his value. So I think the floor continues to bottoms out from here for Zeke. That being said, you start looking at Zeke relative to what? You're looking at the Elijah Mitchells, you're looking at the Leonard Fournettes, the Josh Jacobs, the AJ Dillon. Like these are the guys that are below him. You can make an argument that I'm okay trading a Zeke Elliott in exchange for a James Conner plus. If I can get a little extra juice on James Conner, I'll take it. And then I think both of them are really only going to be relevant for the next year. And then I don't know what's going to happen with Zeke, but that's probably what I'd look to do. So I agree more with Pat that he's definitely a do not touch, do not acquire. But there comes a point, I think, if his value drops down into like the AJ Dillon range, he becomes okay, fine. I'll acquire him for that.
Right. Yeah. And that's where we're standing out on everyone. And I know Pat was upset to hear that AJ Dillon because Pat is the leader and president and founder of the AJ Dillon fan club.
He's good, but he's splitting carries with Aaron Jones at best.
Yeah. I agree. Let's my running backs here. I'm going to go a little bit further down the board here. And I have CEH and Devin Singletary as guys that I don't want. Now their values aren't terrible. CH is 28. Devin Singletary is 35 right now. But I was a CH guy. I thought he had that, what Austin Ekeler is doing with the Chargers. I thought, maybe we're going to see that. He's in a good offense. He's, he doesn't have to be the first option because Hill and Kelsey are there. It hasn't worked out so far. Last season, 44th in total points at RB, 29th in average. So he's not even sniffing RB2 right now. And he's valued in that borderline because he's on the Chiefs. And I don't hate Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones actually looked good spelling Leonard Fournette a little bit last year. He's not as good as Leonard Fournette, but I don't know that he's worse than CEH. So it would not surprise me to see Ronald Jones be the leading carrier in this backfield next season. And Devin Singletary, just like, I know he had a big run at the end of last season and everything. I don't care. James Cook is better than him. I think all around. He's faster. He can play in the slot. I think he's going to be more valuable. I think the coaching staff is going to see that. And, Devin Singletary is going to go by the wayside a little further and further into the season. I think Cook is going to take more and more touches. Cook isn't a guy that's built to take, 20, 30 touches like his brother, but I think he's going to do enough to eat into Devin Singletary. So, Izzy, what do you think of CEH and Singletary there?
Yeah, starting with Singletary, I don't think there's he's become completely irrelevant. He's being drafted as an RB3, right? Almost borderline RB4. So I can see either direction with that. You can go either way. With CEH, it's interesting because his value is now, if you look at his career arc, it's following the Miles Sanders train. And interestingly, Doug Peterson comes from Andy Reid's system. And this is the big thing that I kind of was concerned about with CEH coming in. If Andy Reid and Doug Peterson were willing to have Nile Davis eat heavily into Jamal Charles' workload and Jamal Charles' prime, then you're going to have an issue with Clyde. I mean, you look at Brian Westbrook and Jamal Charles, and both of those guys, Jamal Charles is one of the most efficient running backs of all. Actually, he is the most efficient running back on the ground of all time statistically. So you look at that. Yeah. Hook 'em horn. So CH, he had an uphill climb from the get-go. They were not going to give Clyde the workload. He would have needed to have been a Hall of Fame level running back to even garner the possibility of that happening. But now he's at a situation where he's being drafted, like you said, we have him at 28 as well. So we have him, and you have him in the middle of as a mid RB3. And now I'm like, okay, Ronald Jones doesn't worry me. If he didn't worry me behind Leonard Fournette in Tampa Bay, he's not going to worry me in Kansas City. He's a 0 in the passing game, and that's a big no-no. I'm surprised Andy Reid even brought him in. So I look at this with CEH and said, okay, now we're at a spot where his floor from a production perspective and a value perspective is reasonable to where I'm okay acquiring him as an RB28 or RB28 as a mid RB3 and saying, okay, if he gets me some flex appeal, great. But if he bombs out, I don't actually lose that much equity.
What do you think of CH and Singletary, Fitz?
Yeah, I've always thought Singletary was kind of an overachiever. And but obviously the arrival of Cook kind of diminishes his role. They just didn't have adequate committee backs in Zach Moss and Matt Breida last year, and they were kind of forced to turn to Singletary and give him that big.
Everybody except the Bills coaching staff thought Zach Moss was good.
Yeah, no kidding.
Here he is inactive week 1. Yeah, it's crazy.
So, and we know that unless he had that sort of massive load that he had down the stretch, it's going to be hard for a Buffalo back to be truly valuable as a member of a committee because Josh Allen, almost as good as that offense is, he kind of saps running back value. He runs in touchdowns himself. He doesn't really throw to his backs that much. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on Singletary's value, taking a big hit this offseason. And CEH, man, the Chiefs fans, you've got the best barbecue in the world. You've got Stroud's Chicken. You've got the Plaza. But your team drafted CEH ahead of Jonathan Taylor. You can't feel good about that. And, I guess I've been out on CEH ever since after that first that Thursday night debut against the Texans when he looked so good. And it's kind of been downhill ever since. So
I was excited about him, but JT was my number 1. So Izzy, let's go to wide receivers here. Who do you got as wide receivers in Dynasty that their value is too high and you don't want any part of them right now?
Yeah. So this is one that this is a tougher draw, I feel, because you can go a multitude of different ways with who you don't want to touch. Since one of you guys is covering, I can't remember who it was, the Eagles side of things. I'll pivot and kind of go back to the age side of things. Davante Adams, not touching. Stefon Diggs, I'm not touching, both for the same reasons. They're both, being drafted as top 15 receivers. We have Davante Adams at 7. And for me, it's Davante Adams is arguably the best receiver in the league. Okay. The problem is at his age, Julio Jones was also considered the best receiver in the league. And you could make a case that at 28, DeAndre Hopkins was the best receiver in the league. So now Davante Adams is 29, and we've seen historically with receivers and age, 27 is the highest their value becomes. Cooper Kupp is actually the exception to the rule, only because he won the Triple Crown and he had ridiculous stats. Okay, and he came from nothing to somewhere, right? So he was he was outside the top 20, and then he had the top season in the league, right? So that makes sense. But for a guy that's already being highly coveted and highly drafted, it's going to be impossible. It is impossible for Davante Adams to maintain value going into next year. 100%, I will put my life on it that no matter what Davante Adams does this season, his ADP from a receiver perspective will be below 7. And you can make the case that Tyreek Hill is going to be the same thing, and Stefon Diggs. They will all go down in value, just like DeAndre Hopkins did, just like Julio. Julio Jones had like 1,700 yards, and he still lost value going to age 30.
Yeah. I mean, there's they're going off at 6 and 8 right now. So Fitz, it's hard right now in ECR anyway. Davante Adams is 6, Diggs is 8. Are you out on Adams or Diggs, or is this a little premature, do you think?
I'm mostly out. I mean, I'm not. I guess if my championship window was pried open in Dynasty, I'm not necessarily looking to sell those guys because I think they can help you this year. But I agree with Izzy. Like, it would be a long shot for Adams to equal his 2021 production with the Raiders. I mean, we know team-changing wide receivers generally do not fare as well in their first year with their new teams.
Yeah.
Even though Adams and Derek Carr made beautiful music together for 2 seasons at Fresno State. Like Adams just put up ridiculous numbers those 2 years. But there's no way he's going to have that same sort of chemistry that he developed with Aaron Rodgers. It's just not going to be quite the same. And
the ball placement, it won't be the same. I mean,
it's Aaron Rodgers. Will not be, right.
Yeah.
And so agree with Izzy there. I agree with him on Diggs too. It's been a really good run for Diggs in Buffalo. I could see it continuing for another year or two, but this probably is not a bad time to get out.
And these are guys that are still, no one's going to be surprised if they put up wide receiver 1 numbers, right? Yeah. But no one will be shocked. But it's just their value right now. Their value is probably worth more than they're going to give you, even if that is wide receiver 1 numbers. So you can get back more for these guys that will improve your team overall. That's kind of the point here, right?
And the sharp play would be like, okay, well, I can go get the discount Davante Adams and go get Mike Evans for half the price. I can go get the discount Stefon Diggs and go get Keenan Allen for half the price. So why wouldn't you do that? It's kind of like the Austin Ekeler to Aaron Jones things. There are discount versions of players. Now, will Mike Evans give you Davante Adams 100% production? No, but it'd probably be 80% of Davante Adams. Same thing with Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen might actually put up more points than Stefon Diggs this season. And honestly, they're 2 years apart, but Keenan Allen's kind of his value is pretty much it's not going to dip too much further from here over the next couple of years. Like we saw with Fitz going into age 30, 32, 33, 34, like the decline in value starts to slowly depreciate over time. He's already hit his big depreciation. Stefon Diggs hasn't hit that yet. He'll hit that next year. We're going to be talking about Stefon Diggs in the Mike Evans tier territory for value. And then you can look at acquiring him. But right now you should get out from under him and pivot to like a Keenan Allen and get the same production for half the price.
Yeah. And I love that mentality too of there is, the main guy, there's the discount guy, then there's the Dollar General guy, right? There's always a version of these guys because, skill sets are different. Production levels are usually the same moving down on teams. So Fitz, wide receivers here. Who you out on?
All right, I'll give you an opening act and a headliner. And the opening act is a guy who used to be a headliner. He's kind of past peak, and maybe this is kind of an obvious one because it's Adam Thielen going into his age 32 season. And I feel like this might be your last opportunity to get something for him, even if it's a little something. age 32 season. Last year, cratered in efficiency, 10.8 yards per catch, 7.6 yards per target, both career lows. Justin Jefferson's a target hog. KJ Osborne, pretty decent. Admittedly, not expensive, but our trade value chart has him equivalent in value to Brian Robinson, the rookie running back on Washington, Khalil Shakir, another Buffalo rookie, Zach Ertz. And like I'd definitely rather, especially if my team wasn't going for it this year, maybe kind of rebuilding or retooling on the fly, not a bad idea to see if you could get a younger player, even if it's a day 3 rookie pick who, we know the odds on those guys aren't great, but I'd rather take my chances with one of those guys. And then the headliner, AJ Brown. I mean, his value is just so sky high right now. And he just went to a team whose quarterback is a mediocre passer at best. We talked about it earlier in the show. He went to a team that drafted Devonta Smith in the first round last year, and that also has Dallas Goedert. So it's not like he is going to be, yes, he's going to have a big target share, but is he going to have the sort of target share he had with Tennessee? He's had some nagging injuries the last couple of years. His efficiency numbers really fell off last year, like big declines in catch rate, touchdown rate, yards per catch, yards per target, down across the board. Not saying AJ Brown is bad. Like, I think he's a very, very good receiver. We probably still haven't seen his best season yet, but I think the value is higher than it should be right now. And considering that, equal values on our trade value chart are Dak Prescott in Superflex, Christian McCaffrey, Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, Kyle Pitts, like huge difference-making players. I'd much rather build on one of those guys, any of those guys, really. McCaffrey's maybe the one who you're kind of towards the end of his peak. But give me all those guys, I think, for Dynasty over AJB.
Yeah, Izzy, I feel like Adam Thielen is like that Price is Right game with the yodeler, and he's about to fall off the cliff. I just feel like we're right there. We can't go 50 cents more. He's going to fall off the cliff. I think a lot of his value is tied in the touchdowns now. So he's going off at 53. I don't think that's crazy, but he's about to go down to the 70s and 80s. If it happens this year, it does, so he's right on the edge of that. AJ Brown, on the other hand, it's tough to say you're out on AJ Brown, and you're not out, but wide receiver is so deep. It's not going to be shocking if any of the Debo, T. Higgins, Metcalf, Waddle, like there are so many guys that can move up over AJ Brown. And, you talked about how you're not the biggest Jalen Hurts fan either. I feel like AJ Brown made Ryan Tannehill better. So I wouldn't say I'm out on him, but I would say that he's probably the end of this top tier, and I probably won't be rostering him where he's going off right now. Or are you in agreement with both those guys, Thielen and AJ Brown here?
Not Thielen, because I think he's kind of like the dollar store version of those top end guys. Like he could give you a pretty good season. And honestly, the risk reward proposition is in favor of the reward side of things. Like if Thielen bombs out, you're losing like late second value. I'd much rather have the potential production instead of late second type of value. And like Pat mentioned, Khalil Shakir is in the same window there. Like Khalil's probably going to be a 0. Like he's probably not going to be anything in the league. So give me Thielen, who could give me one final, low end RB or wide receiver 1 or high end, wide receiver 2 season. That's definitely in the range of outcomes if you can stay healthy. So I'm okay with Thielen because I think he's like the dollar store version of those guys we mentioned. AJ Brown would be on my list, and honestly, it's everything Philadelphia. There's just too much there that needs to be fed, and there's not enough volume that can feed it. So it hurts because AJ Brown was last year's. I think he's the best young receiver in the league, but he's not going to give you best young receiver in the league production anymore. And Devonta Smith was my most owned rookie receiver, and now that's gone to shit. And then I got Dallas Goedert, who I had a ton of shares of, and now it's all just a giant mess, and it's being weighed down by Jalen Hurts. So I completely agree with AJ Brown as much as it pains me. So yeah, I'm I don't think there's any way that he can give you ROI. And if it does happen, Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert are going to be almost unstartable in fantasy if that's the case.
I agree with those. For me, I have one that is just a personal opinion of mine, and one is to poke at Izzy. You know, he's our guest here. We got to give him a hard time a little bit. But the first one for me is Chase Claypool. He's right now going off at wide receiver 40, which is cheap. It is very, very cheap. And, you know, I know that's going to pique some eyebrows, but he went, Chase Claypool went from his rookie season with, I mean, all of it was tied into his touchdowns, but he went from wide receiver 23 to wide receiver 38 with the addition of Najee and Freiermuth. Now we're going to have George Pickens in this equation as well. There's just some guys going behind him. Calvin Ridley, even with the issues, Jahan Dotson was a first rounder. I like him. Tyler Boyd, Sky Moore. These guys are all going after Claypool, at least in ECR right now. I'd much rather have all of those guys than Chase Claypool long term. Claypool's got a huge frame, high upside, match Megatron, and all these, you know, combine things. I get it. I just don't know. I don't think he's ever going to be Mapletron, which people want to make him because he's Canadian, you know. And then my guy to needle here, Rashod Bateman at 23 is just a little high for me. And I think Rashod Bateman could be awesome. And, you know, this is the old, they got to throw the ball to someone. Marquise Brown is gone, but they still have Andrews. They're trying to bring in receiving backs here with Mike Davis and drafting Tyler Batty. I think they're definitely trying to find someone to catch the ball, which hurts me on Dobbins a little bit. That's a whole different story because I'm a Dobbins fan. But Bateman, I'm just going to have a little lower because I think Bateman is a fantastic 2. I think you bring someone else in eventually to be a 1 here, and you already have Mark Andrews. So I don't know. Bateman is just a little too high because I haven't seen him do it. He only started 4 games last year. I still think the talent is really good, but I would want to buy him as more of a mid wide receiver 3 than buy him as a wide receiver 2. So Izzy, since I'm needling you here, since you're president of the Rashod Bateman fan club, also Deontay Johnson fan club. Yes. I like that. I like that you have both of these AFC North guys. I'm a Steelers fan. My dad's whole side of the family is from Pittsburgh. So I was big on Deontay, and Deontay got like weird. He was all over the place in evaluators before coming into the league. Bateman wasn't. Bateman was pretty respected. A lot of fantasy people were upset that he went to Baltimore because they run the ball more than anybody else, but they have to throw it. I think he's a good 2 option. I just think he's priced a little high right now. So it's not the skill, it's more the price. What do you think of my Bateman needling you here?
2020, I would agree with you. 2021, after 2020, I would agree with you. After 2021, I'm a little bit more optimistic. Baltimore is 9th in the NFL in passing attempts, which would be a complete shock to just about everybody. So if Lamar Jackson can improve his accuracy, which is to be determined, I think that there's enough volume if they continue passing. You know, they had 36 attempts per game last season. So if they continue that, there's enough there for him to support Andrews and Bateman as a wide receiver 2. So you had mentioned you like him as a mid wide receiver 3. I think there's definitely a path there for him to be a wide receiver 2, like a mid wide receiver 2. And there's nobody. Duvernay is the wide receiver 2 right now.
Hey. Let's not knock on Duvernay too much. I'm a Texas fan here.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm a Steelers fan too. So, you know, but
Texas, I get it. Yeah, Colin. I respect that. But I think Rashod Bateman is a fantastic receiver. And I think that he could be a wide receiver 1 on an offense because technically he's going to be the wide receiver 2 because Andrews is the wide receiver 1. But I think there's a path there, like I said, for him to all produce his ADP, and he's young enough to where even if he puts up a high-end wide receiver 3 season, he'll maintain his value, if not increase a little bit. So this is not a bias thing. Like I'm in on Bateman. You know, one of my do not touches. I mean, I'm the biggest Derrick Henry supporter since the day he stepped into the NFL, and he would be in my do not touch list. So like I'm not a biased individual here. I'm giving you a straight up opinion. I think Bateman is not necessarily a do not touch. I think he can return dividends.
I'm extremely biased, but not when it comes to information I'm putting out. So that's why I don't think they're going to need to pass the ball nearly as much as they did last year, because hopefully, 8/12 of their secondary doesn't go on IR this season in Baltimore, and they want to run the ball. That's the goal, is to run the ball there. The Harbaughs run kind of the same type of stuff in college and in the pros. They want to run the ball. Pat, what do you think of Claypool and Bateman there?
Yeah, I'm going to side with Izzy and gang up on you here on the Bateman thing, right. Bogman. So, Izzy is up in the Twin Cities area, and I'm like a Big Ten wonk myself. And like, I just love Bateman and his game, and think like he's really got no glaring holes in his game. And like, I thought he was a fantastic receiver for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And, he just never really got traction his first year. They had the quarterback issues in Baltimore, the injury issues.
QBs. Yeah. And, Tanner Morgan's good, but,
Yeah, and no Hollywood Brown, I think, does kind of clear the runway. Like Izzy said, I mean, Mark Andrews is going to be their number one target, but like Bateman is in a good position to just play a role every week and have a steady target count. So I'm in on Bateman for sure. But I'm with you on Claypool. And man, you're the Steelers fan, Bogman. If you're out on Claypool, it's like my guy Michael Salfino said about Claypool: all tools and no toolbox. And I think that the Pickens pick screamed that Tomlin's kind of fed up with this guy, and they're looking to get, they're looking for the escape hatch, I think, on Claypool.
As soon as he started yelling at Trey Turner in that Thursday night game against the Vikings, I was out. That was kind of the last straw for me.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man, you're gonna yell at the veteran. It was your screw up. Come on, man, what are we doing here? But
striking a pose with the first down when you're running the 2-minute drill and trying to get.
Have a brain in your head. Have a brain in your head. That's all we ask. It's frustrating stuff. So, but I ranted on that when it happened. We don't have to go through that again. But Izzy, I want to thank you so much. Please tell everyone where they can find all your great works across the internet, and what do you have coming up?
Yeah, you can just find me on Twitter at DTC_Izzy. And I don't really put on a lot of good content on Twitter. I just kind of I'll troll and do other things. So I wouldn't say there's a lot of good value to be had there. But on the show, most of my content that would be any of value would be on shows. So Dynasty Trade Calculator podcast. I don't do any written work anymore. I've kind of retired. I've sunsetted that after, 5 years of doing it prior. So I'm done with that stuff. So just on the podcast or on Twitter.
At Fitz_FF. Fitzy, another one in the books here. What do you have coming up? What can we expect from you?
Yeah, I just want to chime in first on Izzy. Like, listen to Izzy on podcasts and you will become a better fantasy player. Like, he is someone I've really looked up to and like gotten some strategy tips from over the year. And I think like listening to Izzy has made me a better player. So definitely listen to him on shows. Man, we're just continuing the off season at FantasyPros, and just like now we've been kind of focused on best ball, putting out a lot of best ball content. So if you're into best ball, be sure to check us out in our best ball draft kit.
Obviously, you can find me here on Twitter at Bogman Sports. I do my Discord, stages every single Monday at 8 Eastern, and the In This League Fantasy Football podcast with myself and the Welsh. And I had Andrew Erickson on this week to talk about initial rankings and guys that I kind of thought were tough to rank. So you can check that out as well. But that is going to wrap it up for us. We'll see you guys next time. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.